time for another round of Brandy. Candid conversations over cocktails about all things brand. With your hosts, Reilly Newman and Scott Saunders, the brand developers behind Motif Brands.
Welcome back to another round of Brandy. This is a special, very special episode of Brandy.
It's our 50th episode. I'm still like, it seems like yesterday we started doing this. I'm just going, hey, we're gabbing in the office. Let's just hit record and see what develops. And then.
Yeah, since then it's grown worldwide. Brandy is listened to everywhere from America to Italy to Germany. I think we have some people in India, Australia.
Yeah, it's surreal, I think, because we just didn't know what kind of how this would resonate with people, and it has, and we're stoked. But before we launch into, I think, what we were going to talk about today, I love, right, usually moments before Reilly and I are like talking about, okay, hey, let's do, we'll work in our day, right, to wedge a time into to do a podcast. And when one of us has either pet peeves or little things like little nuances, we're like, oh, this frustrates you as in the world of brand or as a consumer. I always say, hey, let's hit it off with a little a pet peeve moment. And Reilly, you had one literally 10 minutes ago. You were reading emails or something, or saw something pop up.
I saw an update. It was a news update from one of the largest brands. So Amazon released Alexa Plus, and this is apparently Alexa, like we've all come to regret having in our homes.
I've never had an Alexa. I just want you to know.
She just slips into these little devices, and then you'll be saying something, and then she'll start listening. But anyways, Amazon released Alexa Plus. So this is Alexa integrated with AI, apparently, where now the ad has it where, you can have conversations with her and talk to her and lie in your room alone talking to Alexa.
Alexa Plus.
So maybe good for the lonely soul, but
let me just give context for our listeners. So I'm at my computer. I'm doing some work, and Reilly just all out of nowhere just yells, "No more pluses,
no more!"
And I'm like, "What?"
This is one of my pet peeves right now. Is that I've noticed a pattern where either in the product world you get people adding pro to the end of the product name, or in the service, productized service world like Alexa, you get companies adding plus.
This is, from a branding standpoint, this is like them doing everything, fitting in like everybody else, and it creates those frictional moments with I think in the market space for it.
Right, and I just feel like it's overused. And yes, the audience gets it, right? You have Apple TV Plus, Disney Plus, Hulu Plus, Alexa Plus, everything's plus, yeah. And so the audience gets it. There is a plus. And then it just kind of, and to me, it's such a funny thing because it's like this open-ended of going, okay, well, how much more plussing can you do?
There'll be a plus plus.
Is there a plus? It just keeps going. And it's like, it's just this endless, and rightfully so, in my personal belief of it, Disney is the only one who has my permission to use plus, because historically, Walt Disney, that was something he would say when he'd walk around the park is, how do we plus this experience? We need to plus that. And so that was a nice open-ended way of asking the Imagineers.
How do we make it better?
Make it better. Yeah. Make this a plussed
So Disney
experience.
Plus, keep doing what you're doing.
Fine.
And technically, I guess Hulu Plus, because Hulu is now owned by Disney.
True.
So they can still do it. But,
through marriage.
Yeah, I mean, so anyway, getting back to our 50th podcast episode, and I think one of the things we started looking at is what do we, how do we celebrate it? It's not like we've been around for 50 years, right? We're talking 50. But we were like, what about who's been around for 50 years? Someone big that we could talk about and maybe from a branding standpoint. And we stumbled on one definite that turned 50 this year, and then another of its giants, the giant competitor of it, turns 50 next year. And that's
Microsoft was 1975, and then Apple was right after that in 1976.
So Microsoft is celebrating its 50th year this year, and Apple's right around the corner. And I just started thinking about it. I was like, God, between these two brands, right? Like, yeah. I've personally, and yes, sidebar, I've always been an Apple user since the birth of desktop publishing, because as a graphic designer, that is what they've always dominated the market for, and in the software and everything else. So I've always been a Mac user. But I always thought, 50 years, Microsoft's been around 50 years, as long as Apple. But I don't think of Microsoft having a great brand compared to Apple, and which, if you've listened to our 50 of our podcasts, we talk about Apple a lot. There's other brands we talk about a lot, Disney again being one of them. But I'm just surprised by that, and that's what kind of started this conversation of what do we want to talk about. And I think we're kind of between the brands, right? The brand war between Apple and Microsoft, and why have they been different? Why do they have two completely different approaches to brand?
And what's incredible is that, they both were in a sector that had hyper growth behind it, but being around for 50 years that's very few businesses last that long. So it's incredible that both of them have survived, because there were other companies that were trying to come out with personal computers and tons of competition in that space. I think Apple's approach to the market versus Microsoft's is that, yes, they're both entering this new era of computing and what's on the horizon, this endless, yet so much money pouring into it, and just the technology advancing so fast, yet they approach the market totally differently. And now that's, 50 years later, they've both survived, but you can see a big difference, really.
We had to buy a laptop for my son and for high school. And it was a PC, because he was kind of into gaming too, and it was his first computer. And he's like, I really want to. It's for school, but I'd like to go with PC. So we ordered a PC, and when it came, just everything about the packaging and the box, it was the weirdest, clunkiest. Even the cable and cords, it was just like kind of thrown together, and I was really like, yeah, no wonder it was a $300 piece of hardware, because it's cheap and came cheap, and that continued to support my impression of the brand, though. And then on the flip side of getting a new laptop for myself with an Apple one, yes, I paid a lot more for it, but just the experience of unboxing, everything about it, like the brand just spoke to me as a consumer better than I feel like the Microsoft world. And again, it's weird because Microsoft, because it was software related, it's built its world network to so many other companies that, in a sense, support its operating system. Dell and IBM and HP and all these manufacturers that make the hardware. Is Apple not only created software and an operating system, but built the hardware around it. So it is apples and oranges, I think, when we're talking about brand comparison, right, Reilly?
And I think it's more proof that you can have, such a vast market like personal computing, and you have two brands approaching it from these different sides, where Microsoft is much more, almost to me, it's like bulk. Like it's you buy in bulk, where either, okay, it's really cheap and it's not the finest materials or highest quality, but you can get it for bulk for schools, for large companies, and then Outlook's baked right in, and you have all their,
Office,
Word, Office, and all that. And they
dumbed it. Software-wise, I think, like Apple's always like, in all honesty, it's like Apple always tried to come along and go, okay, here's their version of Office, and they came out with Mac-based compatible. I mean, you could, but they didn't play it exactly. You've got to export out as a doc file or whatever, and they've always dominated in business and enterprise, finance, product inventory, right? There's a heck of a lot that business solutions software-wise.
Yeah.
It was more like, I think it was the idea of like PC is more business and work, and Apple was focused more on home life.
Yeah, and I feel like that's a good point, because it is PC or Microsoft to me is kind of like, it's like cubicles, where it's similar to like what IBM represented, where then Microsoft was almost like this like offspring of IBM, where it was just more cubicle thinking and gray suits and just kind of like order and
Severance,
very Severance-y.
There we go.
Yeah, it's
Severance is the perfect. There's the work life and there's the home life, and Apple dominates in one area typically. Except if you're, and I think that's what the other thing is, like sectors. Like Apple to me serves more of the, I think more the creative art side of sectors. In other words, if you're in the entertainment industry, music industry,
always more
creative arts, like in our industry, right?
Yeah.
The desktop publishing always. I think dominated more on the Mac side of things. But then when you got into computing software in other areas outside of that personal life, that's where it was always like, okay, definitely for PC, but is there a Mac version, right?
Yeah,
and a lot of times not.
When we were talking earlier, I think that's what I see with Apple, the pattern where Apple, even like Steve Jobs, which I have a theory on this, is that I feel like Apple approached everything in the focus of, okay, how is the person going to engage with it though? How is the consumer going to engage with it? Yeah. Rightfully so, Microsoft probably did engage something with, okay, how are businesses, how are corporations or organizations going to engage with using all of this, right? They need this. They need the systems. They need this. And that's like systems thinking or more just like engineer thinking, versus Apple is much more focused on, hey, when someone does take photos, how are they storing those photos? When someone does listen to music, how do they listen to music?
Yeah.
When someone does have a phone call or they have a cellular device, what's that like? And I think that's part of the genius behind it. But then you look at even the history of like Steve Jobs and his involvement with Pixar, with Lucasfilms, with all these other areas where he had these relationships, is that a lot of it was in these very innovative spaces where he was improving the experience and the consumer's engagement with that. Is that even like Pixar was the engagement with story, right? On this like animated field. George Lucas, huge sound, with, was that Dolby Digital? No, not Dolby. THX?
THX.
I think that's Lucas. Yeah.
Yes, THX.
So Steve Jobs' involvement with that, but you had a lot of these that's like focusing on the actual, okay, how's the consumer going to engage with this, right? On a very personal basis. And you like, it's cool because you look at Apple and you go, they took the personal computer and went, how is someone going to harness this technology on a personal basis? Then the next, phase was with iTunes going, how is someone going to harness, listen to music, or the, technology meets or digital music? How is someone going to engage with it on that? And you have the iPod and then the iPhone, and every single kind of big step they make has always been consumer focused.
Well, even you mentioned the fact that what are we celebrating today? We're celebrating our 50th podcast, right? And you brought up the fact that like, podcast, that term, that was Steve Jobs' term. It was birthed out of the iPod, right?
Yeah.
And it's that these are just RSS feeds and empowering them, right? And then
Yep.
So again, Microsoft may have come up with the PC term, right? But it's kind of like now it's
well, even that, I guess IBM initially, they were trying to, way before, they were trying to do like, okay, because computers are obviously going this way of personal computing, and they're trying to shrink down the computer because these things are towers, are massive. And then the Apple One was the first true personal computer to come out because it had a motherboard integrated in it. But then it was like, okay, that was kind of successful. And then Apple II came out, and then Steve Jobs or the Apple, they started just giving them away to the education departments. Thousands of Apple IIs.
Yeah. You don't see that nowadays, though.
No.
I mean, now it's like it's almost like you run into like a smaller K through 12 school. You might have it where all the teachers have a little iMacs, right?
Yeah.
Or laptops,
Now
or
it's
whatever it is.
Chromebooks.
Because what did you pulled up the stat? It's like 72% of the world computing market is on uses Microsoft software.
So yeah, 70% is
70
Windows software,
right?
And then
versus OS.
right, and
One, there's probably Linux.
probably a
in there.
couple
There's
in
other,
there,
yeah.
yeah.
I mean, obviously you got other operating systems in there, but the two big ones, the two heavy hitters, right?
Yeah.
Mac or PC, Mac or Windows. Windows dominates and over the world, and I think that is probably reflective of the various market sectors that it's used for.
which is crazy because it's the same pattern you see in the cell phone market. Is that Android, Google, is majority of the market, and then Apple is the same 25 to 30%, which is insane to think about. Is that how is Apple? Apple is the most profitable like company ever made.
Now, I guess here's part of the question. A lot of people say, well, Apple's too expensive, right? And I get that. Now, we talk about brand is perception, and Apple's brand, I think, is stronger than Microsoft's brand.
Yeah.
The perception of it. Does that come with the fact that it's pricey, the higher perceived inflation, let's say brand inflation, right?
Yeah.
Which we know exists. It's like
Pricing power.
It's pricing power. But I also think it's warranted because there's so much quality that went into it, and it's that perceived value that it brings to me as a consumer, as a brand consumer. I don't mind the high price tag because I know what I'm getting. I'm getting like top of the line.
Yeah, there's definitely a difference. Besides like functional like design and interface and just product design and the materials, but also it is crazy because it's like Apple's been compared to, they have the manufacturing power and the efficiency of like a Honda, but the pricing power of Porsche. And you've got this merging of, okay, mass consumer, but also the pricing power because they focus so much on brand and the perception of it. But I think it's because going back to the root of it is like they have focused so much on the user themselves, how someone feels when using it, the ecosystem of the products. Because really, Microsoft hasn't ever accomplished that. probably the most consumer friendly thing they've ever done was probably with Xbox and the Xbox controller, which won awards and stuff like that. But it went on to then the Xbox brand started taking off and gaining traction in the gaming space, and it almost like outdid what Microsoft was doing within the relationship kind of on the consumer side. And then Microsoft tried to open their stores and come out with the Surface tablet and stuff like that, but it just wasn't the same. They tried to become it, but they just.
And I remember in the past, I remember when in the 90s, my grandparents finally had to embrace what email was, and we as a family needed to get them computers. At least one computer in their house so that they could, because everything was moving towards, everything was online, and you had to go on the internet, and they're like, what's this World Wide Web, right? And we got them. Back in the day, they were the iMacs when they were like the colored, like the blueberry or the orange, like the bulby looking iMacs. And I remember the family getting them and them sitting down and they were able to function around that, even at an older age, because the beautiful ease of which it was easy to navigate and figure things out. And the times that I've been, and again, I know I have a learning curve because I can work around a Mac blind. So the times when I've had to engage with the PC and even the brief trying to figure things out and navigate and help, it's a little more cumbersome, it feels like.
Even the name Windows, it's very, very grid and linear thinking, where you're having to think in boxes within box within box within box,
cubicles. And
Steve Jobs, his history, like I believe his first introduction to it was because him and Bill Gates did have a relationship at a young age. And his interaction, though, was through Atari. Is that he started, I think he picked up a little side job at Atari and then started getting into computers and understanding it. So his entrance into it was gaming, right? Right away, the engagement, the relationship through the computer, not like at the computer. And what's always bothered me about Microsoft's approach to Windows is the start button. Is that it literally says start and it's green. And it's just funny because it's such a linear, like, here's where you're starting, and now where are you going? Versus Apple is much more like open range, where it's you go in there and you have the whole playground. It's sandbox, right? Where you need to go. You got your apps. You have you're interacting with it. There's a relationship with the engagement. Versus, okay, you need to start. You got to press go, and then you're going on this linear path to where you're going. Again, focusing on, as a brand, going how. Not that you're just creating something that's functional. It's like that's you should do that to be in business. You need to have something functional that's providing value. But then on top of that, it's going, how is someone actually engaging with it? And like we always talk about, is like that empathy of where Apple is able to go, how is someone actually feeling when they are, at their computer, staring at a screen, staring at lights, blinking back at them? How is someone feeling when they are actually engaging with the design, with the interface? And that's what you're paying the premium for. It's just like, that's why iPhones are engaging.
Even as a brand, in Apple's famous 1984 Orwell commercial, that just showed that drab, like kind of like it was like
marching and
robotic, like, and again they were pulling a nod to the PC world, and then boom, 1984 was like boom, the Apple, and it was like this break out of the cubicle, break out of the box, break out of the screen, right? They threw a hammer, I think, I forget what it was. It's been a while.
The big old screen at the guy talking.
And that they were clear, that brand, from a brand, they were communicating to the market sector, right? We're different. If we're talking brand tactics alone, I haven't seen Microsoft try to do something like that.
They've controlled the perception. The language they choose, how they go about timing. Is that Apple's never. They're never really first to market on anything. They're never, even with MP3 players, that was all hot and everything. They weren't, okay, now we're going to come out with an MP3. We have to come out with an MP3 player. They hit the market with the iPod, which I was even talking to my wife the other day. I was like, that was so genius. The circular pad on it, like, it was, from a product design standpoint, it was
I
so
still have
brilliant.
In a box in my garage, I still have the little iPod, a player that has, it's basically like a little clip.
Oh, the
right?
shuffle.
There's no interface, the shuffle. I still have like a second generation iPod, like 8 gig iPod. I still have old MP3s loaded on it. I think I can charge it up.
I wonder if because I'm sure they're sitting on the product, the actual product design of like a video iPod. Because even when the video or the iPod Touch came out, which is pretty much a dumbed down iPhone that was just audio, I didn't like it because it didn't have the wheel. It didn't have the same. And I'm like, they could make something where imagine if they came out with an iPod video, but it was just, okay, it connects to Apple Music only. So you have unlimited music and you still have the product interaction.
Yeah, because the only downside with there's a reason I probably would be like, oh, I want to break out my shuffle again. Well, it's not Bluetooth enabled, right? I can't stream it to my Bluetooth speakers or headphones. So are there things where, as tech advances and everything is now AI, where literally if everything is AI enabled, it almost eliminates the need for interface. So do you end up having a iPod shuffle size smartphone that clips to my back or whatever, and all I have is an audio enabled? I just push a button and tell the computer what I need, and it gives me that exact. I don't even have to touch it anymore.
There's this cool, it's called Rabbit, and it's it's about the size of an iPod actually, and it's this cool bright orange color, and it's got this cool little clicky, very, very almost like fidget spinner-esque, where it's satisfying to click it when you turn it, like the knobs, almost analog.
Yeah.
And it has a little screen, has this cool little, almost like a Tamagotchi, like the pixelated little rabbit on it, and it's all AI. So you go, hey, and it has all your information and stuff, but then you can tell it, hey, call me an Uber, and it knows your location, it knows all that. Hey, call me a DoorDash, whatever. Hey, write an email to this. So you're literally just talking to it, and it's engaging with all your actually conduct tasks for you. Right now, AI is limited to just researching and whatnot, and not actually performing true scheduled tasks or going, hey, go order me pizza. But that's where the next phase of it. But it's actually interesting. The product design is cool, but I could see where that's kind of the next phase of it. Even with Alexa Plus, where it's she's connected to everything. You know, especially Amazon stuff, going, hey, my lifestyle, make me a meal plan and then line up the ingredients and order those for our family to eat on Tuesday nights for tacos and blah, blah, and it'll know that and adjust to it.
Yeah.
But again, it's looking at this and going, how are the consumers interacting with it? The technology is always going to keep marching forward. Right. Technology, applications, AI, that's nonstop. That train is in full steam ahead. But how we as humans engage with it and the experience that these brands are providing through applications, through products and services, how are we actually engaging with them? And then the brand helping kind of curate that and create that versus Microsoft, where it's, oh no, yes, the consumer can just be a user of it. They can look through the window and just engage with the application and then end it. Right. It's
function only. Yeah. And Apple always, I think, as a brand focused on, and Microsoft's done it well in focusing on application of their product, their software, right? So doing it and doing it well. And it's a function based, right? Apple's focused more on the lifestyle and the relationship with the consumer, which if you've listened to us talk before, that is the core of brand. Brand is the perception and the relationship that the business has with the consumer. And I feel like that is where, because Apple is in the niche it has and feeds the market share that it does feed as a brand, it's always capitalized on that and done that in a better way.
Yeah.
Their function to the consumer, their relationship to the consumer has been more of a general lifestyle and ease and consumer-minded focus rather than, the function only, and doing that well and doing it for the masses, right?
Yeah. And I think, again, in the context of a service business, to me, if you're going to be a window of a service that you're providing, it's really the vendor choice. You can be a vendor to many. You can not charge that much. You can get by. But if you're to be a curator of a service, or better yet, helping your consumer or your client engage with your service, you're co-creating together, you're doing it together and creating an experience, then you're the Apple. Yeah. You're the premium.
Yeah.
But thank you again for sipping on this
Happy
50th episode.
podcast, Reilly. I think another round of at least bourbon in my glasses.
At 49 to go.
49 rounds. 50 rounds of brandy. That would be a lot. That would make for one heck of a Monday hangover. All right. Thank you guys so much for always choosing to listen to us, and we hope you enjoyed this one, and we look forward to the 51st podcast next week. So
until next time,
cheers.